surprised you went riffing along there, Warwick. Our singing geographer, Professor Warwick Murray of Victoria University's Geography Department is in. Good evening.
Something like that, wasn't it?
Very nice. So this week we're talking about the final of our series of the three major crises the world is having, and it's the environment.
That's right, Emma, and once again, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to be.
Thanks so much for coming in. You've got a banjo today.
Got a banjo today, yeah.
We'll save that for later.
Yeah, and that's right. This week I thought we'd talk about the environment a little as the third major challenge from a geographical perspective. If you remember, we've talked about globalisation and development, and of course the environment is the next one, and they're all interlinked in ways that are quite subtle but incredibly important, and geography is the kind of subject that tries to untangle those links.
Very good. Shall we start with a song?
Okay, right, why not? Here's a little song called From the Ocean, and this is a song that I wrote about the inevitability of the environment setting limits on human activity. But hopefully it's a little more poetic than that statement. And it's also about the fragility and the vulnerability of the planet we live on. So it's called From the Ocean. I hope you like it. I couldn't sleep last night for thinking how everything just slips away. And as I lay there in the darkness, I listened to the crashing waves. And as we walk along the sands, building castles on the way, the tide carves its own future, washes our yesterdays away. From the ocean to the ocean we are thrown, alone on the waves, only in control of today. When I think of all the things we love, it took so many years to build, I look back and I see nothing but space, and wonder how it was once filled. And as we walk along the sands, building castles on the way, the tide carves its own future, washes our yesterdays away. From the ocean to the ocean we are thrown, alone on the waves, only in control of today.
Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Professor Warwick Murray. I did like the throw-a-wone, I must say. That's a nice effect.
That's a new word.
So in terms of geography, does environment mean something different to layman's term of environment?
Well, of course, Einstein once said the environment is everything except me. So in that sense, we've got a very broad subject that we deal with. But environment is absolutely critical and core to geography. It really is. It's in some ways it's the defining aspect of the subject, but in particular the humans or humankind's relationship with the environment is the thing that drives the subject, the way that we interact with it, the way this has changed over time, and the various concepts and ideas that we use to govern and regulate that interaction over time. So, in terms of whether it's different to layman's terms, not really, no. It has to do with physical processes, but importantly, how those are mediated by and how those interact with social processes.
Right. So, what is how has it been conceptualised for geography?
Well, in the early days, in some ways, the organising principle of the discipline of geography was what we call environmental determinism. And in that song that I just sang there, really, that was a song about environmental determinism. The idea is that ultimately, the environment determines what we do. There are limits that are strict, that are established by the environment that humans cannot break. And in the early days, the geography of the world really was seen in that sense, and maps of the world were created looking at different environmental regions, different climatic regions, and then it was assumed from those that certain behaviours and certain cultures would result. And this in many ways was an important development in the discipline, but ultimately shown to be quite fallible, really. Then we moved to the notion of environmental possibilism, in that the environment creates possibilities for humans, and different cultures approach those possibilities in different ways and make the most of what they've got, creating all sorts of different outcomes. And then, of course, we've also got the concept of human determinism and technocentric thinkers. That's people who believe that technology and human ingenuity will solve all environmental problems and there are no limits, would argue that humans actually can determine the environment. But I think, as we're all seeing every day, and certainly in terms of long-run trends that we can identify, this is not the case, and we live in a world that's at the very best defined by environmental possibilism and at the very worst by environmental determinism.
Do you look at the world as an organism in itself?
I guess one could do that, and the Gaia hypothesis would argue that the world is an organism, and that in that sense all sorts of interesting possibilities arise in terms of the role of humans within that organism, and whether or not ethically and morally they should be given precedence over other components of the environment, including animals and including other ecological entities. Hard to say.
But actually, no.
I don't actually know myself.
There are some changes, it would seem, in weather patterns and huge droughts, crazy storms. Is there an increase in people keen to study environmentalism as a result of this?
Absolutely. And part of the, ironically, when we look back at these 4 spots that I've had, globalisation kind of permeates all of them. And one of the fortunate aspects of globalisation with respect to the environment, because there are lots of unfortunate ones as well, including the type of industrialisation that we pursue and the problems that creates environmentally. But one of the fortunate aspects is that, in fact, more and more people have become interested in the process, and those processes have been diffused, and concern about those processes has been diffused. I mean, ever since humans landed on the moon, allegedly, and and we saw from space for the first time the Earth floating there in the sky. You know, the concern has absolutely exploded across the planet, and we're seeing that manifested in all sorts of ways. The formation of non-governmental organisations, other less formal groupings, as well as intergovernmental agencies as well. The United Nations, of course, very active in environmental concerns, and of course the mainstreaming of that in the political process as well. And it's been very interesting to watch how green politics in some ways has become mainstreamed in many democracies across the world. And of course New Zealand is very instructive in that regard. We've got one of the most successful Green parties ever, possibly after the German Green Party. So there's been a rising interest in this, and what we see at university level is a definite increase in demand for amongst students who want to learn about the environment.
From a geographical perspective, are you optimistic?
I'm kind of, from a geographical, well, there's my personal opinion and there's the geographical opinion. I think my personal opinion is because I tend to be optimistic about everything, probably foolishly so, but that as long as we allow globalisation to be reconfigured from the bottom up, as long as community voices are heard, as long as we're sensible about regulating the worst impacts of what we do, it is possible to solve these problems. But a blind faith in technological solutions and the free market will not do that. In fact, it will take us further away from that. So under certain conditions, I'm optimistic. And I think that geographers are too. I mean, they study all sorts of aspects. There are all sorts of very interesting developments in the subject over the recent past about the science of sustainability, about the impacts of climate change. And one of the most important and interesting has been the rise of political ecology as a subject. And political ecology looks at essentially the social and environmental impacts of political and economic processes. And it looks at the impacts on the ground, really, of political choices that are made. And when you study that, you realise that it is possible to forge solutions. We do own policy, and we can create a policy that works.
But you don't think it's too little too late?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Optimistic. What are the areas of interest to you in terms of geographical environment studies?
Matters, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
No, that's all right. No, it's the point is, as I say, there's been an awful lot of activity in geography, and in some ways geography is defined by concerns of the environment. And in New Zealand, we've got a lot of geographers who are working on some really, really interesting projects. I've got a master's student, Helen Montford, who's working on the role of aid in the creation of renewable energy in Tonga, for example. And the links between environment and development are very, very important. We've also got a chap, Dr. Andrew McGregor, who's working on the impacts of the RED scheme. The RED scheme stands for reducing emissions through deforestation and forest degradation. And what this scheme sets out to do is set up systems whereby in poorer countries rainforest can be conserved, and in return for financial payment, which will be gained through trading on the carbon markets, communities can maintain their forests, maintain the integrity of their cultures and all the other things that come with the forest, many of which of course are completely intangible. And at the same time, we remain, we reduce deforestation. And what Andrew McGregor is going to do with a team of PhD students and master's students from Victoria and Macquarie in Sydney is look at where that money goes, who decides who gets that money, what happens to the villager at the forest face, so to speak, and is that person rewarded for this conservation, or is there something in between that mediates it? It's very important, of course, in trying to create sustainable practices that these policies reach the right people, and it's suggested currently that isn't necessarily the case.
Is it something that geography gets into as well? Corruption?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a very big problem. But I think at the root of everything is that, generally speaking, poor people would only destroy their own environments because they're poor. And ultimately, to me at least, and I think to many geographers, it's a problem of poverty and inequality. And that's why these issues of development and globalisation and environment are all linked together. The chap who cuts down the rainforest, in his back garden, so to speak, does so because he's poor. The fishermen in Fiji that are overfishing do so because they're poor. So ultimately, to tackle that environmental problem, we need much more holistic, sustainable solutions that incorporate economic policies as well.
So what geographical tools do you have to deal with this threefold problem: development, the environment, and
globalisation?
And globalisation, thank you. Gosh, my brain tonight. Anyway.
No, not at all. The thing, geography by definition really is about all those three things at once. And it's very difficult to break down the subject into its constituent parts. And I guess one of the most important challenges then for geography over the coming years, if it is to face these enormous problems of global relevance, is to maintain its integrity, to keep together the physical parts and the human parts, make sure that it's still integrated, and also make sure that we face up to big issues, that we don't direct our study towards increasingly minute and esoteric subjects, that we deal with the big issues. And if we do that, I think, given that we've got such a wonderful young generation of students coming through that are keen on understanding and solving these problems, then the subject has a bright future.
What opportunities do you have to get out of the university and talk with the people about these sorts of issues? Because I suppose that's another aspect to it, isn't it?
Absolutely, it really is. I personally do go around and do the occasional lecture in public, and indeed all of our staff, or many of them, would be involved in that. And of course, we rely on our students as well to take what they've learned and discovered for themselves in the classroom out to the world. And in many ways, therefore, I see teaching at a university as a really effective form of activism. Because if you plant that seed in other people, even if only a small percentage of the class of 300 people take it up and join NGOs and or even just talk to their friends about these matters, it will snowball. So the word does get out there. It gets out there very rapidly, actually.
If people are interested in getting involved in geography, what's your advice to them?
Well, the first thing would be to buy an atlas.
Why is that?
Because as we said in the first week, the first question you asked me was is it all about the length of rivers and capitals? And I said yes, in some ways it still is, because that's the basic geographic knowledge that we need to have. So, and also atlases are beautiful things. That's the one thing. But look, read the newspaper, look at the issues, try and understand the geographical component of them, and of course study it at school and possibly at university. Even if you don't do a whole degree in it, take a few papers in it and you will be absolutely enthralled.
Marvellous. Well, it's time for your banjo now, I
think.
think.
Oh my goodness, this is risky.
Is it in tune?
I don't know. It was in tune when I bought it, so if it's not, I'll take it back.
Professor Warwick Murray, what's this one about?
This one's called The More You Know, The Less You Know. And it's about, and it's something I talk to students about, as you learn more and as you read more, you find that more questions present themselves to you. So if you feel in your kind of intellectual progress that you're actually going backwards, that's good. You know that you're right, the only true. Sure as day, as sure as night, and try as hard as you might, this mortal eye can never see out of sight. Take a trip up a mountainside, reach the top, and you're sure to find, stretching out towards the sun, 1,000 peaks, of which you know but one. This mortal toil can never be done. There's nothing known under the sun.
Smoke on the water, very good.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's The More You Know, The Less You Know, with a new ending. Although you've never heard it before, so you wouldn't know that it's a new ending.
Marvellous. Professor Warwick Murray. And you're playing over the next wee while?
Yes, I am. That's right, Emma. We're playing tomorrow night at the Kelburn Village pub with my Cuban trio called Cuba Blue, with Miguel, who was here last week, and Roberto Rodriguez. And I'm off to play a few gigs in Chile quite soon with a blues band, because I'm actually really a blues musician, and the harmonica's my main thing, and we'll be playing over there very soon, as well as the Fiji Blues Festival.
Thank you very much, Professor Warwick Murray.